I think that people think, okay, I'm retired, we're going to have all this great sex, but they haven't had sex in a while. And so things may not work the same way. They haven't really put the time and effort into maintaining their sexual lives. And so that's a part of what I talk about often is like, you know, you have to also maintain your body so that you can have the sex you want to as when you're in your 70s and your 80s and your 90s, right? Because
Yeah.
it will inevitably decline with age because your VO2 max is going to get lower. You may start having blood flow issues, which will affect arousal in men. You may have changes in the vulva after menopause for women. And so many things are going to happen that will affect sexual function if you do nothing. And so I think that that's a big part of it too.
It is. It is. And I think when people come to me and they're so out of the habit with sex, jumping right, it's like if you haven't been to the gym for a while, you don't go and you do like the hard workout you used to do the last time you went to the gym.
Hmm.
You have to work up to it. Right. And so if your body has changed, if you now have joint pain or, you can't find a comfortable position like you used to, rather than just trying to dive in the way you used to, it's time to reconnect and figure out how your body works today and what feels good today.
Hmm.
I mean, I would say that to anyone at any transition in their lives because our bodies do change all the time. And what we want changes all the time. Our nervous
Yeah.
systems, rewire. Things that used to feel good last year may not feel good anymore. And things that never felt good before or never even seemed interesting might suddenly seem curious or interesting to us. So I would say, starting with experimentation,
Hmm.
when we talk about sexual adjustment, it really is experimenting and finding out what our bodies can do. Often sex, in order to have pleasure, we may need to be doing something for a period of time. Often people give up if they don't have a response right away. I'm sure you talk
Yeah.
about this all the time. So people may have an idea of how quickly they're supposed to be right. They're supposed to be aroused, or if I do this, this should just feel good. And if it doesn't feel good, it means it's just not working.
Yeah.
And so this idea of it just doesn't work. Whereas I'm going to take a step back and say, well, tell me a little bit more about what were you trying? How long were you trying it? Could we make some little modifications or tweaks to see, how this might feel. But
Hmm.
rather than focusing on outcome, whether something works or doesn't work, we want to think about process and learning and just what we notice. And so helping people to readjust, it can be an experiment of noticing,
Hmm.
noticing what feels good and doing a little more of that if it feels good. And then when it stops feeling good, maybe changing to something else.
Yeah.
Maybe sticking with something for a while before we decide it's not going to work. And instead, we're just going to notice what we do feel. So I would say it's like we've been away from the gym for a while, just like with sex. How do we get back into it? We don't know if we're going to ever build up to the same strength we were at before, the same endurance, but that's okay. We may not need that.
Hmm.
Instead, we can figure out what we can do and slowly build to that. And sex is like more of a marathon than it is a sprint. And so we want people to be able to have the ability to be comfortable and to be able to be in positions for a while or do activities for a while that don't cause repetitive stress. So it's a matter of learning with our new bodies what we can do and how we can make some adjustments.
Absolutely. And I think, people really hate the idea of doing work around sex.
Yeah.
And I always say that anything worth having is worth working for. And, sex is a natural thing, but it's not something that you are always innate in terms of how to give pleasure all the time or receive pleasure, right? It is something that may evolve and it's okay to figure it out and to take time for it and to just like luxuriate in the experience of being with your partner. It doesn't always have to be the way it looked the last time, even. It can
That's
look
right.
different and it can still be great.
I think often people presume their sexual goals, and this is one of the other unspoken, unconscious narratives often, that sex is about orgasm, or
Hmm.
sex is about my partner having an orgasm, or the sex is about, whatever they think it's about, but they haven't really stepped back. And, for a lot of people, when they really think it through and talk to their partners, sex is at the heart of it about connecting.
Hmm.
You talked earlier about challenges with sex and how it, there's our social cues matter. Sex is a social activity when it's between partners. And
Hmm.
so when we start losing the ability to socialize, we can feel very isolated and broken. And so figuring out how to re-socialize that could look different than the way it used to. I mean, you think about COVID, right? And people
Mm-hmm.
used to do lots of things that suddenly they shut down in COVID, and they're learning how to even get out of the house and socialize, like literally socialize.
Yeah.
They don't have the same endurance they used to hang out with people. They
Mm-hmm.
need to spend more time at home or have more control over their schedules. Same with sex, right? We have to learn how to re-socialize after an injury or as we're aging or after childbirth. And so this adjustment that comes with, learning about what our body's experience is important, but also how we engage with another person with this new body, with this new state of being, with our new values is
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it starts with understanding what the goal is here. And often people don't even think it through. But the goal may be, I want to be close to you.
Yeah.
I want to connect with you. And for some times I feel like I have this incredible intense feeling in my body and I need release.
Yeah.
That's a different goal. And they're all valuable, but it's important to understand what's the priority here. What are you aiming for?
And oftentimes a lot of people mistake sex for just being close with someone, right? Like that's how that's the only time they're close with their partner. And so they're like,
Yeah.
I need that because
Yeah.
that is my time to be close to my partner because maybe they're not an affectionate couple. Maybe they don't hug and kiss and cuddle. And this might be the time that they do that. And I think that's also important to realize. When people are going through adjustments themselves and their partner is like the same, right? They haven't necessarily had the trauma. Maybe they haven't had a baby. Maybe they haven't had an issue with their health. How do you tell them to talk to their partner about what they're experiencing?
One of the biggest challenges with the adjustment is a partner's expectation that, once my partner goes through this, they're going to be back to normal, whatever normal was before. And so often it's about sometimes it's really important to work with partnerships. I find it super important because often when someone's going through a health problem or a challenge, they have all the support in the world. They're going to see doctors. They maybe have been referred to therapy. They have support, but their partners have not been supported in the fact that they've lost that connection or the need. So I think being able to get support for both partners is important. I think having the understanding from the beginning that I may come out of this different and we're going to figure out what our new normal is going to look like together is super important.
Yeah.
I think the partners that have been hoping, I don't think I see this all the time, the partners that have been hoping, just waiting and thinking, okay, once this is over, I'll get my life back. Everything's going to be back to normal. My partner is just going to be, back. Feel really disappointed and feel really hurt and often abandoned because they weren't expecting their partners to change. And so being able to support both partners and set realistic expectations of an adjustment is huge.
I think that's such a good point. I never thought of it that way. Whereas like the partner's actually feeling abandoned, right? Because they never were told that things might change irreversibly, or they were never educated on that. And that's why I think it's so important that the conversations we have here, because, learning about yourself is important, but also learning about what other people go through and how it doesn't mean it's the end. It just means that it's different. And like learning that you can work through this, but we all have to sort of manage our own expectations and our own feelings and thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I think of conversations I have with so many partners of people going through menopause, either surgical or natural menopause. And the fact that it changes how their partner's brains work, it changes how their partners, perhaps their hunger for sex. They may no longer be hungry where they used to have hunger, and then the partner feels like, why are they rejecting me? Not understanding that this can happen when your hormones change. This is a biological thing that happens, and how we experience the world, what our sensations like on our skin, what we're hungry for, how hungry we are, that all changes. And so people feel like, they're alone. Like, why did my partner abandon me? What's wrong with me that I'm not desirable anymore? Rather than understanding that this is actually something that happens for a lot of people when they go through these changes. And it doesn't mean that your relationship's broken or your partner doesn't love you or want you. It's just that desire presents very differently. They're showing up to meet you when they know that you're hungry is a way of showing that they love you and they want you, even if they may no longer feel hunger themselves. Some people have never felt that hunger, but people can feel very alone. They feel left or abandoned.
So for the person that might feel abandoned, right, where they're like, I just want my partner who used to enjoy sex, How can they start that conversation? Because I feel like when they try, I don't think they intentionally want to hurt their partner's feelings, but it's like, hey, why aren't we having sex anymore? That's the question,
Sure.
right? That's pretty much the most common question. And then the person's like, I just don't want it. And that's the end of the conversation. And
Yeah.
it doesn't go any further.
Yes.
And then they feel even more abandoned.
Yes.
So how do you tell people to approach that conversation?
Yeah. I mean, I happen to love structures of nonviolent communication where it's speaking about our experience. So, not like what's wrong, but rather like I've noticed a change. So it's like talking about what you objectively notice. I feel lonely or I feel unmet, and what I need or what I may request from you is that we connect again, but I don't know what that looks like. So, being able to use a language that's not blamey, it's not just a yes, no, like why aren't we, but rather I'm experiencing a change and I really want to be able to feel like we're connected again. I need that from you. I don't know what it looks like though, but I need to have a conversation with you about it, because otherwise I feel us growing apart.
Yeah.
So I think it's that way. It's really, I feel us separating or growing apart and I miss my partner. The way we used to do that seems like it was sex. I don't know how to interpret the changes without talking to you about it.
Yeah.
And this is where having a sex counselor can be really helpful, to normalize the conversation and help when emotions get really heated and someone's feeling really blamed, then, to really be able to redirect and help someone come up with a language that may be better.
Well, I think the other issue is I would love the
More
idea of sex
effective.
counselors is that how do you get that partner to go with you to the sex counselor, right? Because
Yeah.
that still requires a conversation.
It does.
So if you're, and again, I always tell people like it's not one conversation, it's many conversations. And so
That's right.
it will take some time, but I find that after being rejected over and over again, it becomes very difficult, right? And so I find that how do you even get the partner to a sex counselor?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think a lot of people are afraid to go because they think when they come to see me, I'm going to tell them, you have to start having sex again. So they're afraid I'm going to start telling them to do things that they may not feel ready for. That can feel really, really scary. Rather, I think it's a matter of I'm feeling distress and I would like to, and our relationship is in distress. And so I'd like someone to help us figure out how to get out of this distress in our relationship. I don't know what that looks like. It doesn't mean you have to change, but it means that I would like to figure out how we come to understand each other again. And that's different, right? It's not, I'm going to take you to someone to fix you because you're broken and you're the cause of all of my ills,
Which
and
is
all
like
of my
this, I
problems.
feel like that's the common thing that people feel or even think that's going to happen during therapy.
And what normally happens is
Yeah.
actually the person who's the most distressed, and who's blaming the other partner. I'm really going to work with them directly on their distress
Yeah.
to understand it and be able to make sense of it and figure out what they need to get out of distress. The one solution they may have thought of before is, well, my partner can just show up sexually the way they used to, and then I'll be out of distress. That's great, but that's not working.
Yeah.
So let's think of some other ways you can get out of that distress.
So I want to talk a little bit about you.
Sure.
You sort of mentioned earlier that you went through a health issue that sort of changed your trajectory. So tell us a little bit about that.
Since I was a young child, I've had urinary stuff. So, I've worked with urologists my whole life. I have something called bladder pain syndrome. It's been called interstitial cystitis, painful bladder syndrome. So, and that was diagnosed as I was a teenager, but it fully debilitated me when I was 29. So I was working in finance and, I used to have some flares of my condition with bladder pain, back pain. And so I could take some days off of work and, feel like, I've taken care of myself. I could go back, but I kept doing the same thing the same way all the time. I would just kind of take some days off and then go back and work the same way until one day I had a flare that just wouldn't stop. And I was kind of surprised when my physical therapist said, oh, no, we'll reevaluate you in a month. And I thought, well, this is usually just a couple days. So I had spasm in my pelvic floor muscles that was completely debilitating. I could not sit, stand, find a comfortable position. And I was in physical therapy 5 days a week. And it took a long time before I learned to self-manage and do a lot of the work at home. And I wasn't seeing a physical therapist pretty much at least once a week. So it was quite a journey. But in that process, I was searching. So I think I mentioned earlier, when I had that pain, sexual arousal made my spasm feel worse. So, my condition was completely, sex was tied up in this condition. So certainly, and then I learned also, though, if I could have a sexual, an orgasm, or I could have a pelvic release, and I learned how to do a release, that could help my spasm a little bit. So one day I went to see a physical therapist, and I had timed my pelvic release like the physical therapist would do, but I did it at home with a partner, releasing my muscles around orgasm, like during arousal, through orgasm, and after. And I went back to the physical therapist, and the physical therapist said, your pelvic floor looks different today. And I thought, wow, you could see what I did. So
You're like,
I thought,
oh no,
right. But it was, thankfully I've always been really comfortable talking about sex. I'm very grateful to my parents for that. And I know all my clients are thankful for that too. Thank you. So because of that, I could talk openly with my PTs and my physicians, and I was asking for more information because I thought, if you can see that, if what I did at home is actually changing my pelvic floor muscles, maybe we're onto something. Mm-hmm. So I could feel better. The process was that I was talking to all of my physicians and physical therapists, looking for information, looking for research, and there wasn't much. And yet they started sending clients to me as a patient advocate because I could talk about sex comfortably. As I started talking to other patients, I realized, I think I'm good at this. I think I want to do this. So I went back and got a PhD. So I felt like I really knew what I was doing. Yeah. And all that means is I learned a lot, but I know what I don't know. That's the great thing about getting a degree, right? You just, you know what you know, and you know what you don't know, and you know where to find the information when you need it.
Which I have to just stop you for 1 second, because that is so important. And that is really why you want to look for sources online that are credible and have done some education. It's not because they are superior in some way, but there is some education that's done where we know what we know, and we know what we don't know.
We know what we don't know.
And we know how to interpret data and give it to you in a way that's nuanced as it should be. And I think that's really, really important.
Yes. And when someone knows what they don't know, they help find someone who does know.
Absolutely.
And so that's key. So much of my work is, I work collaboratively with other professionals. It's knowing when to refer out and knowing to whom to refer at certain times, who would have the answer. But my job isn't to know everything. My job is to help people move along their clinical pathway until they get what they need.
Yeah.
So that's all of our jobs, right? And we're not supposed to be the be all and end all for any one person. I went back to school and decided, I think I'm doing this. And it was really rewarding to be able to be helping people in ways that, having a background with pelvic pain gave me a unique perspective that I could understand what my clients were going through. I did my dissertation research looking at exactly that thing. Wow, you can see what I did, where I got couples together. I did a pilot study, and clear my throat. I did a pilot study in my dissertation where I was testing protocols to include partners in doing pelvic releases at home. So they trained with a physical therapist. We measured how the pelvic floor looked before doing any of these protocols. We trained the partners to know how to do pelvic floor release. And then they went home and they did the release, and they timed it around arousal or orgasm. And then they went back to measure the resting tone of the pelvic floor. I didn't do a large study. I did a pilot study to even see how the protocols would work, and if I could do a larger study.
It's safe and effective.
I haven't gone back to do it yet.
Safe and feasible.
Feasible, exactly. Yes. But it turned out that of the couples who did it, no one got worse, which was great. We were able, but again, there's no statistical significance here because it's a small number.
Right.
But that they were able to learn how to manage this on their own. And in my work, I'm of course I want people to be able to work with the best providers, but what I'm hoping for is that people learn how to manage themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So like the goal of my clients is to graduate with a toolbox and to feel like they're experts on their own process. And they know, it's like they have a PhD where they know what they know and they know what they don't know, and they know where to reach out for resources when they need it. So it doesn't mean they never ask for help again, but that's really the goal, right? Self-management. And so what was really interesting when I did my dissertation was I was thinking of this as, okay, we can learn how to help the pelvic floor, change the resting tone to help with pain. And yet the couples that were interested in participating in the study were looking at it as, this is a way to make my sex life better. It's also important to be thinking about like what does motivate people. People's motivation for what they do is crucial for people to be invested in something. And so that really helped me learn more about in my clinic. We need to truly understand people's motivations to make sure that everything that we're giving them makes sense to them and keeps them invested.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, they're not going to reach their goals. They'll give up.
And I think that's so important for people listening is when you see anyone, you need to make sure it's very clear what your goal is. Because for a lot of people, like for doctors, for example, we know like this is a debilitating problem and you probably want this to be better, but that might not be your goal, right? Your goal might be like, I want to fix this so I can have sex, or I want to fix this so I can do X, Y, Z. And it may be a very specific thing. Like I want to go dancing, or I want to walk my daughter down the aisle, or I want whatever it is, but you need to be very explicit about that goal and the timeline for that goal so that the person that you're talking to can say, this is feasible, or this is not, or this is what I can get you likely.
Yes.
Right. And I think that that's so important because oftentimes you're nervous. You're going in to see a professional about something that you're not comfortable about or that you're feeling vulnerable about. And so you're in a situation where you're like, I don't know how to, I'm just going to go. But I think it's always so important. Bring notes. Know what you're going to say. I have never been upset with a patient for bringing notes and being like, oh, wait, let me bring this out. And literally reading from it because I want them to tell me, like, they may feel embarrassed, but if they have to read off something and just say it, that's fine. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think that's so important.
Totally. And, I have forms that people fill out before they come and see me. They can fill out as much or as little as they're comfortable filling out, but it's really it helps them to structure their thoughts so that they feel prepared when they come in. Some people, as you say, do better writing and it's harder just talking at first. Some people haven't really thought through why they're coming. And so it's harder to get what they want out of their experience if they haven't thought it through. But so that's why I try to help them structure that. And if they haven't done it, I'm going to ask those questions directly anyhow.
Yeah.
But everything as a sexologist, like everything I do in a sex counseling setting is patient focused. They have to define their goals.
Absolutely.
I don't define their goals for them. That would be inappropriate. And that actually it's really not ethical that I tell them what they should want. I don't have all of my clients' backgrounds, even with pelvic pain, right? I have pelvic pain, but I'm not in my clients' bodies. My pain was different from theirs. And that was the other thing. When I did my study, I also did, so I did mixed methods research, and I was really looking at people's qualitative experiences. I did interviews with people just looking at how they perceive the overlap or the integration between their pain and sex. And I think what's crucial is to understand that everyone's narrative and everyone's associations look different. And so I can't tell someone what their sex life should look like, what their experience is, what good sex looks like, what healthy sex is. That's not for me to say. It's for me to help them to define, based on their own value system, based on all of their frames of reference. And just because I have pelvic pain, I can't ever say that I know what you should do, but I can help you figure out the direction based on what you're comfortable with and what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so valuable. I love qualitative research because I think you really get a good in-depth understanding of what people are thinking. And the beauty of it is it's meant to be to saturation, right? So when you look at these studies where they've interviewed people, they do these complex sort of analyses in the back end to say, okay, we're seeing the same thing come up over and over again. And yes, it could be limited by the sample, but generally if you look at who they're studying and what the sample is, if that reflects you or reflects whatever sample you're looking at, that's likely what most people are thinking. And so it's really valuable.
Yes. And I mean, I experienced it in my body as the interviewer. You start seeing, doing grounded theory, you start building the theories as you go based on what each person tells you in an interview. It helps you know what questions to ask of the next person.
Yeah.
And so you build the theory. It's very beautiful. It was exciting. I was so passionate doing my research. It wasn't just a numbers thing. It's like I felt it in my body. And I felt pregnant by the time it came time to write my dissertation. It was like I couldn't get it out fast enough. I woke up writing and it was crazy.
Yeah. And we've done some work on Reddit, and we've looked at forums about like orgasm and what people are saying about them. And I think that's also great. And I do think that AI is going to be so helpful in this space, because it'll be able to like analyze, all the information on forums and
That's
really
right.
get a sense of what people are feeling and thinking. And I think once we are able to harness that, more broadly, I think it's going to be just transformative for
That's right.
how we learn about what people are really experiencing.
Right. But the real concerns are because they're talking. That's right. They're doing it out there on Reddit. They're not
Yeah.
necessarily telling, all their doctors.
Yeah.
So
So you developed something called ergoerotics.
that's right.
And that's supposed to help people get certain positions when they're having chronic pain. Is that right?
Right. So ergorotics is, applying the science of ergonomics to erotic activity. So, and ergonomics is simply the adjustment of the environment and the activities to fit the needs of the people involved. So it may be a matter of adjusting positions. It may be a matter of adjusting what tools you're using to stimulate. It may be a matter of adjusting, the movement strategy. Yes. So I did create some materials to help people with those adjustments. But ergorotics is a process, really. I created videos. I picked the very top, most common health concerns people will have, which are, I needed to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't address every issue in a video. But so I started with back pain, because it's ubiquitous, knee and hip pain, and pelvic pain. So I did videos on all three of those, and it's really helping people understand the mechanisms of their pain and what their limitations are, and then how to make adjustments so that they feel like they're experts. So for instance, like with spine, when someone has spinal pain, what we've learned through studies is that people have directional preferences of movement, meaning my body feels better when I'm bending forward or I'm in flexion, whereas my body feels better when I'm arching backwards or in extension. So based on what my directional preference is, if it's bending forward or backwards or having no weight on my spine, or keeping my movement really limited. Those are 5 directional preferences. Once I know what that is, then I can help design what activities would work best for you.
Yeah.
Once we know someone's directional preference, which they may have worked out with their physical therapist, a lot of physical therapists are getting much better at helping people even with sexual adjustment, but not every physical therapist specializes in that or wants to talk about it. But I created some videos that couples can watch together and then figure out if my directional preference is extension or, arching my back backwards, then these are the ways I would try to modify some classic positions. And it's not just a matter of the static position. So one of the challenges is often materials are pictures, right?
Yeah.
It's like, be in this position. But we're not thinking about the movement strategy. I might first get into position where I'm in extension, but when I'm moving into flexion a lot. So it's not just the static position, but it's how we're moving. So I really tried to address that in videos so people could see the moving video and, showing samples of movement. People are clothed in the videos. We're in a physical therapy studio. So just giving people, so it should be comfortable for people. It's not porn. It's not meant to entice. It's meant to teach. But so it can be used in a medical office setting as a course, or it could be used as a course for couples at home.
Yeah.
But it's really intended for people to feel like they have more expertise in their own adjustment.
I think that's so helpful. And, there are aids as well, furniture aids that you can, like different types of things that you can buy. And I've made a couple of videos on that on my YouTube channel. And honestly, when I first learned about it, I was like, why didn't we learn about this in training?
Right.
Like, why did nobody teach me this? I had to literally go myself and find it. And it's interesting because the way I learned about it was shown for